What I want to share today is a search that I did using three different deep research tools to help me make a decision on what is the tool stack that I need to build the web app that I have scheduled for my company and for my clients. One of the most amazing things that we have at our fingertips right now, especially since now 2025, is all of the deep research tools that all of the major LLMs have dropped in the last couple of months, with the latest one as of today being the one that Claude dropped. For people who have to make high stakes decisions, critical decision making for their businesses or for their life, especially in this time where everything is changing so rapidly and it's really hard to keep track of what are all of the vectors of change and the inputs that are impacting what it is that we're trying to make a decision on. It's really easy to just get halfway through the decision making process and basically give up and just go with the easiest option, which you're going to end up regretting in the long run. So for this endeavor, I was going to use Perplexity. I pay for that, so you get the pro version, you get unlimited deep research. However, the deep research itself is somewhat limited, but it's a great tool. In addition, I was looking at Claude's new deep research or research tool and ChatGPT's deep research for this purpose. So in all of the models, I use almost identical prompts, and I started out with Perplexity. And I ended up changing the prompt a little bit after I did Perplexity because I asked it to please, I gave it the full criteria for what I wanted and the instructions. And I said, please take reviews and user feedback and experience into consideration to help make your decision. Gave it a little bit of a, I'm relying on you, just to let it know that this was an important decision for me. So it came back and gave me exactly what I didn't want. Was it told me about Bubble IO, which is really popular and it's been around for a while, and a lot of companies have their web apps based on Bubble. However, Bubble has vendor lock-in, and I had a previous conversation with Perplexity. So it gave me this whole thing of what I could be doing with it, alternate stacks, databases, backend alternatives, gave me a nice little cost breakdown and timeline. As you can see, rich, well organized, well structured data even gave me an implementation roadmap. So it figures it's going to take 6 weeks for this. But I didn't want Bubble. So I said in a previous conversation, you specifically told me that user reviews indicated that Bubble, with the vendor lock-in, but also with for some other reasons, low, loading, sometimes not available, was in user ratings not the top. So it said, oh yes, okay, yes, in fact, I did do that. So here's the issues with Bubble. Thank you. You already told me about that. Going with, okay, this is stack that Perplexity is recommending. Webflow plus Make.com plus OpenAI. You could also consider Web Studio. Fine. So I went over to Claude, and Claude and ChatGPT's deep research does something that I have yet to see the deep research do in Perplexity. And I think that's because Perplexity realizes whatever you're going to do 16 million deep researches today, and I'm only going to give you a maximum of the estimate is 10,000 characters on my answer. So this is not costing me a lot. The other two, a lot more compute goes into developing the reports that they put out from your deep research response. So they're much more deliberate. When they're going to be out and doing this research, they know I'm not going, there's a few questions. I want to clarify these things. So it asked me some questions. I gave it the answer so it could fine tune what it was it was searching for. It came back. It wanted to know the specifics of what I was looking for in this web app, the functionality. So it could classify, are we looking for complex logic, moderately complex? And it came back and said it was somewhere between the two, that I'm looking for these characteristics. Knowing that, it went forward. It's asked me for a budget, and I said, I don't know, for the beta stage, let's go for $100 to $200 monthly. And as you can see, it looked at 490 sources, which is pretty damn impressive. It took 9 minutes to do that. So here's what it gave me. After looking at all of those sources, its first recommendation was Bubble. So I was a little disappointed with that. But it gave me really great detail on it. And as you can see, it's all linked. You can go and do further investigation. It gave me a second option for the tech stack, which was Webflow, which I believe I saw over on Perplexity, why this works, real user experience, and a third option, Glide, which was the only time that I had seen that. So I came back with one of my major concerns about Bubble is, and I took the explanation from Perplexity. All of this is like cross-referencing, cross-analysis, cross-validation of all the three AIs and their deep research. And I said, this is what I found. I said, that's exactly what I found. So why didn't you act on it? So again, it gave me now 472 sources that it had searched. and gave me a second report. In this second report, it ins took Bubble out of the mix and said Flutterflow was its performance powerhouse choice. It gave me another option, which was softer, and it gave me all kinds of great detail. It also talked about Webflow plus input flow, hybrid form builders, etc. Again, amazing depth of information about this. So the thing that kind of bothered me was they were basically talking about the front end tech that I was going to need. So I asked it, does that it? These tools cover everything? And it or will I need other tools in the stack? And it said, well, yes, indeed, you will need others. So it gave me a breakdown of what they would be. It gave me the prices and what the total would be per month. Reality check, no platform is so complete that could do it solo. That's why I asked you. And that's where we ended with that. So I went with this as the recommendation. So now I've got Perplexity, I've got Claude. We haven't come to any kind of consensus on what this should be. So I was going to use ChatGPT deep research anyways, because it is at this point I find the most impressive deep research tool. So same thing, told it I didn't want to deal with Bubble, gave it the description, asked me some clarifying questions, and it gave me this very long, very detailed, very information rich. Just from reading through this, and yes, indeed, I did read through this, the education I got just doing this research between these three tools, asking the questions, getting involved, cognitively involved with analyzing from the three. Well, if you're saying this, why is that? And how does that compare to this? So the education purposes of this alone are incredible. But also, it's getting me to a point where I can start making some decisions. This, I won't bore you with going through every screen of this. And at the end, it gave me all of its sources. Comparatively few sources, when we look at Claude, but I have seen that there's an explanation for how it is that ChatGPT doesn't even bother with the vast majority of the sources. It filters before it actually goes out and looks at those sources. So it's getting the best sources and can narrow it down to just a few. So based on the stack you recommend, what would be the monthly base cost? What I hadn't noticed here is you can see from the emojis that we had slipped from deep research into ChatGPT 4.0, which is good for most tasks, but is the lowest level model that you can be using through ChatGPT. So it gave me this nice little breakdown, told me what the monthly bills would be on all this stuff with WeWeb, Supabase, and OpenAI is the first option. Total monthly cost, testing and beta phase, about $2 a month. That's pretty good. Some optional costs and summary. It seemed to have forgotten, because it's ChatGPT 4.0, that it had also talked about Flutterflow. So it said, oh, right, Flutterflow. So it gave me the similar breakdown for that, what it would be for the monthly cost, what the stack would entail, Flutterflow, Supabase, and OpenAI, monthly, beta phase, and summary. So I then pulled in the information from Perplexity, and I pulled in the recommendations from Claude and said, okay, based on what you've said, here are some other sources. Because it's 4.0, fantastic, you're doing thoughtful due diligence. They said they fixed this, but it's still pretty sycophantic. So it gave me a comparison of these ones, and it wasn't until I got to the end of these. This is pretty good. It's breaking it all down, the components, the code export, its recommendation, the two recommendations that I didn't tell it where I got, just saying it was another research source, comparison by component, my take, backend, workflow automation, AI triggering, AI layering, other considerations, great. This is really good. And I have to say, as much as I don't tend to like the emojis in the responses from ChatGPT 4.40, this was a nice visual here, the yes and the no, check mark and the X. Speed to launch, I hadn't asked it for that, but that's really useful. And final recommendations. Super. Final advice to you, based on your profile from everything I had told it. However, as I said, I, I want to ask the previous response again using a thinking model. So by this time, I had switched over to 4.1 for the analysis. Actually, I'm not sure if 4.1 counts as a thinking model, but much better processing than 4.0. So ran the exact same thing again and got an emoji list breakdown with, again, different format, but more detail on these different options. Recommendations at each stage, evaluation by key decision criteria. So as you can see, this is a much higher level analysis for decision making. Its summary, ease of use for non-coders, UI, UX flexibility, scalability and performance. That's great stuff to be comparing. Vendor lock-in and ownership. Great. None of these have that. AI integration. They all have that. Summary table. Super useful. I would probably compare this with the previous one. I'm assuming this one would actually be of higher value, but I like to compare all the information I can. Decision points, very helpful. Helping me make my decision is saying, like, these are the things that you need to be thinking about, which are crucial questions that one needs to think about. And then as a conclusion, it says, this is what we would recommend. Either go with WeWeb or Flutterflow plus Supabase plus OpenAI. After this process, in all up, this took me about an hour, but in an hour, I have now gotten what I feel is all the information that I need to make a really informed decision on this. Sure, there's a lot of work ahead of me and there's still a lot of learning, but using these deep research tools that are available to us and that most people don't even know about can really make your high stakes decision making so much more data informed and just easier.